Are the RED DSMC2 cameras worth it in 2024 and possibly 2025? Well, in this video, I'm going to go over a few pros and cons to owning a RED camera in 2025 and just talk about my experience shooting on a DSMC2 camera in the last year. Also, I'm going to be talking about one specific thing about the RED Gemini, so stay till the end for that. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. My name is Peter DeBusolo, and today we're going to be talking about a camera that is not as popular anymore just because it's kind of outdated, but the whole purpose of this video is to kind of bring back the nostalgic feeling of those RED DSMC2 cameras. In this case, we're going to be talking about the RED Gemini because I own one, and I just want to talk about the pros and cons of using one within the last year or so, and really is it worth it owning one in 2024 and possibly 2025. Now, I just found myself using the RED Gemini over the FX3 or the Nikon Z8 for a few different reasons. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about reasons why I love the RED Gemini and why I think it is worth it owning one in 2024 and 2025. Now, I'm a little late to making this video because we only really have a few weeks left for 2024. So this video is going to be basically, owning one in 2025 and moving forward. And is it necessarily good to own an older sensor or an older camera with all these new current cameras that are coming out on the market that have all these settings that we can do inside these small mirrorless cameras? So one thing that I love about the RED Gemini so much is just the form factor. Now, everybody's probably going to be like, the RED Gemini is a little bit of a bigger camera, but that's why I like it, because the type of filmmaking that I do is mostly all running around with a little bit of a different style build of a camera and a little bit of a heavier camera. It just makes that handheld filmmaking smoother and better, in my opinion, as to where you're holding the FX3 or the Nikon Z8 or whatever mirrorless camera it is. I just feel like you're holding something that's a little bit smaller, and that's why we end up rigging it out, adding a bigger battery, obviously because we need more power or a longer battery life for these cameras. But I just feel like having a little bit of a bigger camera is just better to hold and getting that type of organic style filmmaking look. Now, I love the RED Gemini for so many different types of reasons. One of them is because of the IO expander or the V-mount adapter you can get for these cameras. And now owning, the FX3 or the Nikon Z8 or whatever camera it is, these cameras take smaller batteries and they don't really last that long. So when you are shooting on, in this case, a RED Gemini for me, is you really only need one or two V-mounts and a charger, as to where when you're using these smaller mirrorless cameras, you need to be shooting with like 5-6 batteries, and you have to make sure you have them all with you, because if you only have two and you're shooting, let's just say like a corporate event or like a short film, you have to make sure those batteries are going to be ready for charge or ready to be in use. Yeah, you can run with a V-mount adapter plate, but that's just another accessory that you need, and you need to remember to always have in your bag. And you always have to have cables for that V-mount to go into the camera, whether it's D-Tap or USB-C, whatever it is. In this case, that brings me to another example. The RED Gemini, you literally have to mount the monitor on top of the camera and you're ready to shoot. The monitor takes the power from the V-mount, and you don't really need any cables if you're doing like guerrilla style type of shooting, as to where if you're shooting on like any other mirrorless camera, you need to make sure you have a battery for that monitor. You need to make sure you have a cable for that monitor, HDMI or SDI. Now that depends if you are running V-mount battery, but that's just another accessory that you need to have in your bag. Now, depending on the type of rigging you have done to your RED, in this case, we have the expander on the back where we have an SDI port, HDMI port, the USB input. We have so many other different types of inputs on here. We don't need to attach anything else to the camera to make it accessible for all these other accessories, as to where the RED Gemini has that already. Now, yes, of course, I had to buy this expander or adapter part for my Gemini, but in the end, having all this stuff just makes it more riggable and more of an option for you to add on to the RED Gemini or any other RED DSMC2 camera body. Now, one thing I also love about the RED Gemini is we can always swap the type of lens mount on here. Right now I have the EF mount, I have a PL mount, we can also get an FD mount. Gemini just has, I think, like 20 different style of compressions. Now I mostly shoot in 11:1 compression on a 480 gigabyte mini mag. That can give me just over 2 hours, 2.5 hours, I believe, as to where on the RED Komodo there was only 3, but with the newer update you can get 4 different type of compressions, which are still great, and also the global shutter, which is really great on the Komodo. Having more compression ratios on the Gemini just gives us more flexible of shooting different types of events and runtime of recording. Now, shooting in the full 5K sensor on the Gemini, I believe we can go up to 96 frames per second, which is amazing. And also we have 16-bit red raw color depth in our image, which is great. So having full 5K image with 96 frames per second, 16-bit red raw, I just feel like there's nothing out there that really beats us at the moment. And that's just what brought me to getting the RED Gemini, is because it just seems impossible to beat. Now, with the prices dropping for these cameras because Nikon bought RED and all that news that just happened earlier this year, I just feel like that's why all these cameras are dropping in prices, which is why I want to make this video. I think now is a time to pick up one of these cameras because people are selling them for dirt cheap and you can get them fully rigged out. Now, if you're a hybrid shooter and you're shooting photos and videos, I get it, it's worth it to pick up a mirrorless camera. But if you're someone who's more into shooting short films, music videos, the creative style types of work like I do, that is why I ended up picking up the RED Gemini. Now, another thing I wanted to mention, the reason why I ended up picking up this whole kit for the Gemini, is we have the 7-inch touch monitor from RED. I feel like this monitor is insane. It's probably one of the best monitors I've ever used, to be honest. The touch sensitivity is very accurate. I noticed that as soon as you do turn on the camera, it's somewhat slow, so you might have to heat up or something, or might take a few seconds for it to be more accurate. But going through the whole menu system and touching everything, it's super awesome. And I just feel like there's no other monitor that I've used that has such great quality. And the fact that we can actually turn it around and we can have a viewable image on top of our camera. If we're shooting talking head stuff like we are doing right now, I can literally see myself instead of looking down here at the monitor below. Now, another thing, what I feel like people don't really know is on the Gemini, on the handle, we have a little scrolling button on the actual handle itself, which is where the shutter would probably be. But we can actually use that for follow focus. We can actually run around and control the focusing. If we're using a native lens, we can use this little scroll button to actually control our focus. So if we're a one-man band and you don't want to use your hands, or if you're using like a rig or something and you have your right hand on the handle, you can easily pull focus with the scroll button on the actual handle itself. Now, one thing that I feel like is kind of a downfall to the camera, and there's probably a few other downfalls to the camera, and that's to be finding accessories for these cameras, because these cameras are old. The RED Gemini, I believe it got released in 2019. Now, one thing that I can see being a downfall is these RED mini mags. They might be hard to find. I still feel like there's a lot of accessories out there that you can find. Now, one thing that kind of draw my attention to the RED, I think I might have mentioned this earlier in the beginning of the video, is the image that we're getting out of this. It's very organic, very clean. I feel like the most important thing that draws my attention to using the RED Gemini over any other camera that I've been using recently is that I can just pick my RED Gemini out of the camera bag, turn it on, and I'm ready to go. I don't have to make sure I have cables. I don't have to make sure I got my monitor with me, because my monitor stays on the camera. It screws onto the top and there's pins that attach to each other, and that's how it basically gets the power from the V-mount, and you're ready to go. It just makes things so easy. But I also feel like running around with such a big camera, it can just draw so much attention. And that's where I feel like running around with the mirrorless camera can just make things a little bit easier, especially with the quality that is coming out these days with these small little cameras. One thing that I find unique about these cameras, and I know that the Blackmagic Ursa camera does this, I'm not too sure about the other cameras, is that we have a black shading option that we can do and apply to the sensor. Now basically what this does is it calibrates the sensor, it fixes noise pattern. You're also supposed to be black shading the sensor when you're shooting from a different type of temperature, especially if you're shooting from indoor and you're going to outdoor. Audio on these RED cameras. Now the RED Gemini is very different from the Komodo. I feel like the Gemini has a way better audio interface than the Komodo. The Komodo, I have to raise my gain kind of pretty high to get a good clean audio signal. I actually brought my RED Gemini with me to Ottawa over a month ago to shoot a 48-hour film festival. If you guys are interested in seeing that film, I'll put it up here. I was able to attach my full aim wireless microphones with the transmitter and the receiver, the lavs on the actors and actresses, and I don't think there was any post audio workflow done to the dialogue. The audio coming out of this was very clean. The gain wasn't even that far up. So if you guys are looking into purchasing older RED DSMC2 cameras and you are doing some dialogue work, I'm just gonna let you know that the audio is gonna work perfect. So the last thing I want to talk about is the two types of shooting modes that we have. We got a normal shooting mode, and then we also have a low light shooting mode. This camera is such a workhorse. We can shoot in low light. We can shoot at an ISO 6400 and still get a usable, clean image. Now this is a camera that is 5, 6, 7 years old, and be able to shoot in low light, I just find super crazy, especially that we're in the year, going into the year 2025. I feel like that's one of the most important things about the RED Gemini, is that it's very versatile no matter where you are and what you are shooting. Now, I'm not saying that this camera is better than most mirrorless cameras or it's one of the best cameras out there, but I just wanted to make this video just to clarify on certain things about shooting on a RED DSMC2 camera going into 2025, which I just find kind of amazing because this camera's like 6, 7 years old, and you know, finding one for such a cheap price is crazy because most mirrorless cameras are actually more than this type of camera. You guys have any pros and cons to owning a RED DSMC2 camera or a RED Gemini? Let me know in the comments below what your pros and cons are to owning one now or comparing it to a mirrorless camera. So that's it for this video. We'll most likely see you in 2025. Stay creative.